Okay, so let's get started with what is the last session of your workshop. I'm Santosh Narona. I'm a faculty member in the Department of Chemical Engineering here. But what I'm talking to you has nothing to do with chemical engineering. And instead, what I hope to tell you is some of the things you can do. So what I'm going to be talking to you is actually something slightly different from what that course structure was. If you look at your schedule, it said something about need finding. But instead what I thought is I'll tell you about a program that we are working on, again funded by MHRD, but it's been led by a few institutes including IIT Delhi and IIT Bombay, and it's called Virtual Labs. And what we are trying to do is to actually try to connect with faculty in various colleges. For the moment it's mostly engineering colleges, but towards the end I'll explain how this has gone beyond engineering and why we think this is going to be a major effort in terms of engineering education in particular, but online education in general in the country. And towards the end, I'm going to give you some interesting insights of how working on this actually changed the way I work in my own department. It has changed the way I do research in my department. It has changed the nature of the research that I do, which I now do outside my department. Okay, which actually brings up some big philosophical questions. Understand all of you have just been absorbed into some college or the other. So first let me congratulate you all. It's an important moment for you guys, but it's also a critical moment. All that was said, and I'm sure many things have been told to you all along, but it's a critical moment because you are actually you're being told to go along a certain flow. What I just heard, I just walked in a few minutes ago, what I just heard is things will happen to you and you're already worried about details of how things will happen to you. How will you take leave? That I heard. How do you access resources? That I heard. How do you get started with whatever line of research you wanted to do? That I heard. But I didn't hear certain important things as to what was important to work on. How do you finance whatever it is that's important to work on? What's going on right outside your campus, which might be an interesting place to find problems to work on. And assuming that these are interesting things to work on, how do you plot a path from where you are at, which is you just got a degree of some kind, you just applied for a position, you are entering into a university structure which says really you should be spending all your time teaching XYZ, which means you have got maybe 10% of your time left with you to do something else, but how do you leverage that 10% to do something valuable? So the classical way you normally do work and do research is you start with a thesis that somebody gives you. So in your master's program, I'm assuming most of you, all of you would have had a master's. I don't know how many of you have done a PhD. I heard questions about a PhD, so I guess you have not done the PhD yet. In a master's, you would have done a small project. In a PhD, you are expected to do a much larger project, right? What's unique about the way these are done in our country is both the master's project and the PhD project comes from a guide, as if the guide knows everything. But by definition, the guide doesn't know everything. That's why you're calling it research, right? It's not like a textbook problem which you solve, which means that really the kind of training you ought to be looking for is whatever it allows you to try to experience something, extract a problem. That's why my title was originally need finding. Extract a problem and then try to work on a relevant solution. However, in a situation where resources are not available, and even in the IITs, in certain departments resources are not available, you end up in a situation where you say, I want to take a chance with my career, resources are not available, let me not go work on some problem just because it's a real world problem. Let me do something very trivial, incremental. Somebody has designed a distillation column, let me tweak it, let me design the next generation distillation column. At the end of which, 5 people in the world may be interested in your PhD thesis. It's a fact. And that's true even for the PhDs that we put out. Okay? And we do this if you think about it, I didn't hear any thought process about this from any of you, but what I'd like you to think about is, what's the risk in it for you? What we do is a function of risk. If you're a student and you're entering somebody's lab, let's say that new student wants to join my lab for a PhD, that student is not necessarily thinking, what's that great research insight I'm going to get in 4 years? They're not thinking that way. Instead, they're asking, will I get out in 4 years? It's risk. You don't want to take on a complicated problem because you might not get out in 4 years. There's a good chance that whatever you're attempting on that complicated problem may flop, and many reasons why it might flop. First of all, the idea itself may not have been a great idea. Second, the idea might have been great, but you never had the resources to work on it. You didn't have the equipment or reagents or whatever. Third, you might not have a support system around you of people to come and discuss things with you, help you with protocols, methods, or even just if you are in, for example, humanities, just to even have a discussion with somebody else. Many reasons why things may not work out. Okay. Which is why most of us, and that includes me, when we did research, when we got an opportunity to do research, the thing you ask is, can I do something incremental? So, an honest fact, I became a chemical engineer 25 years ago. I probably became an engineer 5 years ago, because I started asking questions of what's of importance around me. Of course, I had the liberty of working in an IIT, I had career stability, I also had some access to resources, and now I could ask challenging questions. What should I work on? Okay. Most of the things I now work on happen to be in the area of healthcare. That's because I learned a little biology along the way, and it's a no-brainer. The country has a non-existent healthcare system, and it needs innovation in healthcare. Something else which happened coincidentally 5 years ago, at around this time, where I was asking, why am I working on some things and they are just simple problems and I'm doing incremental stuff, why am I not doing great research? At the same time, this program started, and this program did something unique. I'll explain this in detail. That's the objective of the talk, but let me give you a top level observation. This program was unique because we said, let's try to build lab infrastructure in colleges so that students can learn concepts better. Okay. You're all probably familiar with NPTEL. The whole logic of NPTEL was, some instructor somewhere, maybe in an IIT, delivers a lecture, we videotape. In fact, this department, CDEEP, has predominantly done that in IIT Bombay. You videotape these lectures, and then it's available for people to view on their own, and you study these things on your own. I don't know if you have seen students look at CDEEP NPTEL lectures, 60-minute lectures. You cannot watch a 60-minute lecture, right, on YouTube, on a video. What do? Fast forward it, see it at twice the speed, which has meant what? Which has meant that it's not as effective as it could be, because clearly people are watching it at a faster pace than the lectures really happen in real time. And there's a reason one lectures at a slow pace in real time, so that there is time for things to be absorbed. But what it did bring was what? What's the advantage of having a video there? What do you think is the advantage of having a video available to you? You can go back, but more importantly, if you miss the whole lecture, you can go back, forget any points. Convenience. No, that's not true. I can make sure that video is accessible only to a few people. I can control that website. So that's not true. But what it meant was convenience. You could learn at your own time. And then the question got asked by the ministry at that point, really, if we are trying to allow people to learn concepts on their own time by watching videos, how do we get them to do labs on their own time? And we have no model in the country for that at all. Right? In fact, think about the lab. In an engineering department, at which time of day do you hold the lab? Typically. Not always, but typically. Afternoons. Why do we hold it in the afternoons? No, but I could have had the lab in the morning and lectures in the afternoon. We don't do that. No? Very good. So instead, we want them to sleep in the labs in the afternoon, right? Physical work. Do our labs involve physical work really?
Not physical, at least involvement in
What involvement? Most of it is standing around, right? There's some apparatus. Now think about that college, think about the apparatus. You'll be going back to your colleges. I heard you asking whether your college has infrastructure. Think about the lab you'll walk into. There's some rig of some kind there in your lab. Now what are you going to do? What is the first commandment of doing a lab experiment that the students told? Don't break that instrument. Right? You got a problem. Immediately you got a problem because you've told somebody don't mess with that instrument, which means now the set of actions you can do on that instrument are very limited. In fact, that instrument has probably been designed to be rugged and robust because you are expecting a whole bunch of undergraduate students to come in and try to break it. So it's been built to be robust, but something else. How long is your lab? How long is a typical lab?
3 hours.
3 hours. Why is it 3 hours? Because the lunch break ended at 2 and the tea break starts at 5. Which means whatever lab learning you were going to do had to happen between 2 and 5. That's a timetabling constraint on how you learn. And you are expecting people to go in there and do stuff with their hands. And remember, as it is, we are a culture in a country where we are not allowed to do things with their hands. How many of you here have in your homes tried to take apart some device? Take apart your TV, take apart your radio, take apart even a cycle. We are not a culture. We are not a culture who takes apart anything. Because you are told it's too precious a device, don't trash it. Your parents will do that, your teachers will do that to you. And now we have a problem. What problem? Most of our engineers who come out, including even the ones who come to an IIT for a PhD, they don't know what to do with their hands. Because you have never been taught with your hands. And that lab course, whatever you took, your lab courses that you took in college were between 2 and 5, and somebody or the other is near you, watching you. And by the way, you're not doing this alone, you're a team, right? Why are we a team of people at a lab experiment? We don't have enough infrastructure, so now you have to work with batches of students. And what is the immediate problem with the batch of students? If there are 4 people in a batch, what's happening? One guy is doing the work and the others are having fun. If you look outside, somebody is digging the road, there will be one guy digging the road and 4 people supervising him. Same thing. That's how we run labs. Okay. Net result, you have gone through this whole process without learning a thing about infrastructure, about equipment. So the way I put it, and it's a very honest way I think of putting it, is that all we have done is we babysit people in the labs. You have to come in, you hopefully not destroy anything, and you have to get out. And no wonder then that one data set from one batch looks very much like the data set from the next batch. Because at this point, if you are not being allowed to work on that experiment, why would you even wait there to collect data? And instead, you now ask the previous batch, what was your data? Can I please borrow that data? And you try to palm it off as your report. Right? And that's also a common thing. So in other words, there is no attempt to individualize learning. The theory, you couldn't escape that too much. Beyond a point, you have to learn theory on your own. But lab, you could escape by being part of a group and therefore not learning anything. So how do you change that? So when now the ministry says we need some counterpart to NPTEL as a lab, how do you come up with a counterpart to the NPTEL and lab? And in its own way, where the MHRD is going, maybe, I don't know if this was told to you. Why do we have an NPTEL? Why do we have virtual labs? Because where it's all going is finally one online education system which gives you your theory and your labs and online exams and will evaluate you online. Instead of going to IGNOU or some other place like this, there will be an online university. It will be an open university. And we are moving towards that. I'll explain some of the innovative things we have started doing in moving towards that. But to me personally, when this challenge came for us to think, how will you redesign a lab? It forced us to think at multiple levels. One is, what is that lab for? And even in an IIT, most of our labs are pointless exercises. I can tell you that with all honesty. Because the students learn nothing. Okay? But having learned these things, the question then comes up, what are we going to do if we wanted to redesign the concept of a lab? how do I redesign the concept of lab? And one of the first things that came up was, if I need to recreate a new lab, I need people to help me build gadgets. I need to think of ways of getting these gadgets online, because it's all supposed to be accessible to anybody sitting anywhere at any time of day. People should be able to log in at midnight and take a lab experiment. And I have to think this whole thing. And then how do I make sure that students actually are doing it and not his friend sitting there? Well, later on I have to take attendance as well, even if it's online. And later on I'll have to mark that effort by a student online. So what is this entire solution strategy if somebody has to take a lab experiment online? So to me, the magical thing that happened was, I was given resources by the ministry to think this through, which meant I recruited a mechanical engineer, electrical engineer, software guy, all kinds of backgrounds, and I got them together. And then there's an immediate learning. It's only when you're surrounded by people of different backgrounds that you actually learn. So that point I made, up till then I was a chemical engineer, now I'm an engineer. I'm an engineer because I better appreciated the headaches everybody had in trying to design something. But this actually, if you stop to think of it, it's not a new thing. This is how companies would operate. If a Philips has to design a product, a healthcare product, or a BPL has to devise a product, they're not going to recruit only like 10 chemical engineers. They're going to recruit a few of each type. Put them in a group, get them to brainstorm, come up with ideas, ask which ideas matter the most, which are the best, choose a few, give a lot of money to the few, and then try to convert it into an actual commercial product. So this is a certain cycle, but the universities don't work that way, because we have departments, and the departments, if you think about it, are historical structures. So a chemical engineering department comes about because 100 years ago we needed to figure out what to do with petroleum. How do we devise an entire process around petroleum to break it up, crude oil, into various important things, which obviously fuel, plastics, everything comes from there. So how to process crude oil? And 100 years ago you recruited mechanical engineers and electrical engineers and tried to get them to deal with the separate aspects of a refinery, at some point we have said we need a specialization. So we created a specialization called chemical engineering. But that's become a vertical. And what's happened is, if you look at any of your colleges, what is the crosstalk between one team and another team across two departments? There is none. Okay? And in hindsight, that has killed off the range of things that you could have done, because you could have tackled higher level problems, more challenging problems, if you had had the ability to talk and share ideas and share resources, okay, and get things done. So it's a surprise to me that when I said, let me hire a mechanical engineer, electrical engineer, IT person, and see whether I can create a new type of lab, that a number of other faculty members in other departments who I was not interacting with suddenly got interested in this idea. And I would have naturally not interacted with them much, because their research line is different, my research line is different, and we, in hindsight, all of us were suffering because of this lack of cross pollination of ideas. So that's an important thing that I want to give you out at the outset. Don't get locked into one department. You will have a principal, you will have a department head. Go out and talk to people. In fact, the curiosity is, I've been called into all these conferences with international universities coming, especially to India, and asking, what is the future of education in India, higher education? And all these international universities from Australia, from the US, we had MIT here visiting us. Their philosophy now is that the future engineer in particular, but it's also true for people from the arts and other backgrounds, the future is not a future of specialization, but it's a future of generalization. If you're too specialized, you're probably going to be obsolete, which means you really ought to be going out and mixing with a bunch of people. That's a lesson I learned on my own through the effort of trying to create something and realizing I didn't have the skills. But that's in your lifetime, because of the way the economy is changing, this is going to change tremendously, and you really want to go out and, if possible, I'm not saying it's possible for everybody, so I'm not saying it's an easy process, but you don't want to gain one skill, you want to gain 10 skills when you can. So you've always got to ask that hard question: where am I going? What learning do I have access to? And these days you've got access to learning all over the place, right? NPTEL, of course, but after NPTEL, what came up? You go online, you see edX, you see Coursera. Do you realize that they started innovating in a different manner? No longer 1 hour videos, 5-minute short video segments. Why? Because it's easier for us to absorb a concept in 5 minutes. Our attention span doesn't last 1 hour long. So NPTEL is also about to do the same thing. The same NPTEL lectures are about to be broken down into much smaller concepts, and we're going to give them back to you. And that's good for you, because now you have many options. You like the 1 hour lecture, you sit and watch the 1 hour lecture. You like the 5-minute thing, watch the 5-minute thing. You want to get it from somebody not from India but from somewhere else, you have that option. And the funny thing, the people from abroad trying to watch our content. So virtual labs, when it came up, as I said 5 years ago, there was a question asked, what is the best way to run a lab? Now I want to pause for a minute and get some ideas from you. What is a good lab then? We all agree that the way a lab is run, and you've all been through some lab or the other, we agree that it's not a good experience, or it's not an experience to learn from. But what do you think is an experience you would learn from? So I just want some opinions from you first. Every individual should be hands-on. What else? All? Does it have to be just machines? No, you're talking like an engineer now. Does it have to be just, does my lab experience have to be about machines? What resources? But give me an example. I'm not, when you say resources, it's too vague. So you want some software which will allow for some experience. No, that is a matter of just money. Right? I can buy you any number of copies of a software. That doesn't mean a student is going to learn from it. I still have to design an experience.
Of that in the real scenario that will make the experience more valuable.
Okay.
That's the point. Someone has access to all like different streams, like from it's not like a particular one departmental instrument. It's like access to everything that one can think and do something.
Okay. Why should it be easy? Why are we making things easy for everybody? See, when you're doing that 2 o'clock to 5 o'clock business, that's when we make it easy, no? Because we want to be done and go home by 5 o'clock. Why? But here's the thing: why do I have to be there? Why do I have to wait there till 5 o'clock? I just said I want somebody to do the lab experiment at midnight. Why are we saying that this can only be done from 2 to 5? So what is an ideal lab experiment? So obviously the ideal lab experiment is not something we can afford in India, which is why you don't see it at all. But to me, what an ideal experiment is, I ask the students to think about solving some particular concept, some challenge given to them. Then I tell them, over there's a storeroom of components. You go build your experiment, not walk up to some pre-packaged experiment. What's the point? If I walk you up to a pre-packaged experiment, what did we say will happen? First of all, I want to make sure you're not going to destroy this. It cost me some money to buy it. So first thing I'll tell you is don't break it up. Which means, therefore, it's probably not even the industrial system that I'm running in the lab, which means you're not even being trained to actually work in the industry. So two things, if you think about it, why we're doing an experiment. One is you're learning about a concept. The other is you're experiencing what you will finally be using in industry. It's training of some kind. And if the industrial process is an 8-hour process with that apparatus, and you have designed a 2-hour or 3-hour lab, obviously you're not being trained for the industry. Which means the industry is going to be forced into training you on the spot once you're recruited there, which is a total waste of everybody's time. Right? So two things. What are the concepts being taught? And how do you design something appropriate for that concept? And that's research. Think about it. You're going to take up a question, and then you're going to go try to design experiments to try to answer that question. You're expected to put it together. No, nobody's going to come and walk up to you and say, here's an apparatus, get some data, that's your thesis. So, it is no surprise then that we are not really doing innovative research, because we have not allowed people to work with their hands, and we are not allowing them to do so because we do not want to incur the expenditure of people trashing stuff or breaking stuff up. Okay. So, it is only the most top level universities, especially in the US, MIT and so on, where this happens, where people actually told go to the storeroom, get your components, build your own apparatus. By the way, you are not done. You build your apparatus, that will take you probably a couple of days. Then what? Then you have to actually do the experiments to collect whatever data you wanted to use to analyze that concept in the first place. You have to do it under different conditions, whatever it is. So, you get your data. Then what? Then you have to do some analysis, compare it against the theory, compare it against other theories. At this time, you will usually find out that the theory is not matching with the theory. In a normal lab, at that moment, you get into a panic. My results do not match up with the previous batch's result or with the theory. And this is where you start cheating, right? Fudging numbers. But actually, that business where your numbers do not line up with the theory is probably the most useful part of the experience, because you are starting to learn why the real world is non-ideal compared to a simplified theory. And yet, we cut out that experience from people. And then the last part, if you put together the apparatus, you take it apart again and you put it away, which also we do not teach our students to do, or to clean up after themselves. That is an ideal lab experience to me, which is, as you can think, very complicated. It needs a very rich lab to be able to afford this. It also means it is not the sort of thing where I can show them 10 different challenges over 10 weeks of a semester to solve, because it will take you a while to assemble the thing and so on. So, therefore, maybe even doing one experiment in a whole semester is good enough if it is this kind of an experiment. Do you see that? Okay. So, let me very quickly then start going through a few of the things that we have done as part of virtual labs and give you an idea of how you can participate in this and why it connects with what I told you before, of how it will allow you to move away from one classical way of doing research. So, the basic idea has been that physical distances limit you are doing experiments. And even in an IIT, at the end of the day, if you think about it, whatever equipment we have bought, if you are using it between 2 p.m. and 5 p.m., what does it mean? It means that the rest of the day it is idle, which as an investment is not smart. I mean, if I were to think of this as a corporate kind of thing, if I am a dialysis, if I am a nephrologist and I am running a dialysis center and my dialysis machine is only being used from 2 to 5, that does not sound smart. It is not good business, right? So, how do you use it more effectively? Round the clock, and that is the question being asked. And by the way, again, why does it have to be 2 to 5? What is the slot? Now, go back and think of one of the experiments you have done. 2 to 5, the whole experience, that whole concept has been either stretched or truncated to fit into 2 to 5. What do you mean stretched? If, for example, you are a mechanical engineering student and you are learning about heat transfer, then you have some apparatus, you start flowing hot water, you have a temperature sensor there, and now you are waiting half an hour for that temperature to reach an equilibrium, and then you are collecting a measurement of time and the final temperature itself. So, you are actually sitting around doing nothing, you are not learning in this 30-minute period, you are just waiting for some event to happen. If you are working with some fluids moving through a pipe or whatever, let us say it is fluid mechanics, then what are you doing? You are taking pipes of different kinds, you are pushing fluids through either a pump or whatever, and then you have a bucket there and you are waiting for the bucket to fill up. Why are you waiting for the bucket to fill up? Because you want a measure of flow rate. There is a guy sitting with a watch waiting for the bucket to fill up, he knows the volume in the bucket, and then from there he will calculate a flow rate from how much time it took up to fill up the bucket. But that is our way of calculating a flow rate, which probably takes you 10 minutes for one data point, because you used one pipe to collect that one data point, and you are given many other pipes. So, 10 minutes at a time you get suddenly busy, you take one pipe, get the measurement, throw it away, next pipe, get the next measurement, and so on. Okay. So, the point is we are actually idle most of the time, and even in this, as I said, what is happening, as you said, there is a team of 4 people with one guy actually doing the switching from one pipe to another business. for actually measuring the height in the bucket. So, it is not a useful experience to anybody, because I could have put a sensor there and I could have read out a value and I could have even fed that value to a computer and you are done. And you could have instead spent that period of time doing something else which was even more informative. So, this question of how to best use time, and if it was a 3-hour experiment, could I have taught you that concept in 5 minutes, or did it really need 3 hours? And by the way, if it is a long thing and it needs that long thing, then why am I limiting it to 3 hours? If it is an 8-hour experiment, do it as an 8-hour experiment. Now, if it means I have to put in things to collect measurements and automate it just because you cannot be there all the time for 8 hours, then okay, we should think along those lines. Okay. So, this becomes an interesting point in time, because right now the cost of sensors and the cost of data acquisition has dropped tremendously. The cost of getting data and doing things with data is very low, which means we should be redesigning the whole process. So, the broad idea was that we look at either a real physical lab, or for that matter a simulator, and ask the question, could we have multiple people access it through the internet, which is a challenge. Why is it a challenge? Because not everyone has access to a good bandwidth. And can you give them some kind of a learning experience which is guaranteed, okay, to give them some concept. It is now into its 6th year and it is into its 3rd phase, and I will explain what we have done. These are the broad objectives, they will be in your slides. So, you can go through them later. It is a curiosity that most of this was started as just a learning experience, but some of the content already created, people are getting into research mode with it. There is things to be done, because we are creating simulators, we are creating apparatus, and people are starting to ask, can they ask their own research questions using things that they are doing. When the project started, there were 12 participating institutes. Delhi, in a logistical sense, was the lead partner, because MHRD is in Delhi. So, the coordination happened to be more convenient through Delhi. But basically, immediately what happened is, each of these institutes created a zone around it. So, for example, IIT Bombay naturally took care of Maharashtra and Goa and Gujarat and Madhya Pradesh as a zone. And we connected with a whole bunch of colleges there and asked them, would you be interested in lab instruction if we were able to create simulators for you, and would you trial these things out on our behalf and ask whether your students find value in the content we are creating. We created one common front end, because we could see where this was going. I told you, it is going to finally be this online platform where you get your video lectures and you get your lab instruction all now happening through one platform. We said, let us start working towards creating one particular platform. So, really the sort of thing you should do when you go back now is go look at this platform, at the kind of content there is. In the initial phase, we were asked to create content. Can the IITs create content? So, we did a few things, because the easy thing for us to do was to say, let us take our own labs which we are running and just convert them into simulators. Okay? And that is when the thinking started. Why is my experiment here taking 3 hours, when my simulator, how long does it take for a computer to calculate something? Microseconds. So, my whole experience in that simulator is probably 5 minutes. What used to take 3 hours in the lab to learn, and in 5 minutes I am done. And there was actually an interesting challenge for us as a team trying to develop this, and this was done, by the way, initially by MTech students in the department. So, what is the challenge? Somebody has booked a slot with me to learn online for 30 minutes. We thought the lab experiment was going to last them 30 minutes. In 5 minutes, they finished everything that there was to be done. So, how do I keep these people busy? In a real lab, I can waste their time by making them fill up buckets or wait for a temperature to reach steady state. But online, when there are so many distractions online, how do I keep somebody busy online? I need more activities online. My simulator has to become more complicated. I need to give them more things to do, more objectives to solve. Okay? And now there was a challenge for that MTech student who had learned a particular concept, which we immediately converted into a simulator. When you are asked, go back and redesign these things so they are more interactive activities and they are longer activities, they had to go back and ask, which additional theory can I add on to this to make it a more challenging experience? And it took them iterations, because this was not stuff they had themselves done in a lab, and this was not stuff they had necessarily thought about. of how to do, which is why it was very nice to hear these guys say after they built this additional content, they came back to us and said, I think I now understand the whole topic. Because being forced to go out and try to create a training experience for somebody else forced them to go read additional literature and to create content. And after they did that is when they realized that what they had originally learned was a very limited amount of knowledge. And they now felt a better appreciation for the topic. That's a very important point for you guys. There's stuff in textbooks. That's very limited knowledge in textbooks. So go beyond that. Try to create something. Try to challenge yourself to create something. Even if you don't succeed, you will be forced into reading up so many other things that your thought process improves. Now, the other logical thing that happens is in a chemical engineering department, it's unlikely you will find good IT developers. And when you said you have to create an interface, now you have to make friends. Go to the other department and try to convince your friend to spend some time on this. And suddenly teams form. The chemical engineer is talking to a computer science guy and later on to the mechanical engineering guy, because the same heat transfer experiment may be running in both chemical engineering and mechanical. Maybe something else is being taught in mechanical. Can you take that experience and show it here as well in this department? So you start going out and learning what's happening around you. So this process of creation. So we have created this one portal, and I'll briefly talk about two types of labs. One is entirely done by simulation based on models, the other is based on hardware. Because we said, remember the original thing I said, what's the ideal lab? Go up to a place, do stuff with your hands, get your components, build your own lab experiment. That's the ideal thing. And if MHRD is telling me to try to train engineers using labs which are simulators, my first reaction to MHRD is, you're being idiots. Why? We cannot have a generation of people going out learning only on simulator. It's kind of like saying a pilot is somebody who will learn only on a flight simulator. That cannot be the case. It's like saying a surgeon will only learn on software, and by the way, you have surgical simulators now. That's because we don't have enough bodies for them to learn on. It cannot be that way. Okay? So therefore, while a simulator gives me this advantage that I can give you a very quick way of delivering a learning concept, and that too you can do it when you want it. For example, you can log into a simulator at midnight. There is still a long-term problem that you have not learned with your own hands, and for that we said we have got to invest in hardware. So how do I then allow you to remote trigger, so that lab experiment which I have running in my lab, which is used only for, let's say, 2 hours in a day, how do I get somebody else to log in and control the apparatus and do stuff with it? Okay. So let me quickly give you some of the statistics of what's happened since and what have been the challenges of what's gone on with this. This is actually an interface for a typical lab. It's just a typical online front end. You can go visit the sites yourself and see what's going on. Okay. The way it would look for one particular lab. So within a lab, so what's a lab? Again, MHRD, and even if you think about your colleges, there's a very classical way of thinking about this. For you, the lab experience is, okay, the semester is this long. If it's 14 weeks long, then 10 weeks of labs must be run. Therefore, I need to design 10 lab experiments. That's the way it works. We are working backwards all the time. We're not asking the question, what concept should we teach? Okay, so 10 lab experiments. So MHRD said, create a lab with 8 experiments at least each, and that we'll call a lab. Without asking the question, does this particular topic need 15 experiments or 5 to explain that topic? Okay. So we did this, we created this, and if you look at what I'm showing you as all these tabs here, this looks like what? This looks like your typical lab manual. You'll have an objective, this, that. So all we did was mimic the typical lab structure because we didn't want to confuse people. Okay. You're starting to see some extra things. You're seeing some video documentation. Just because the guy is taking it online doesn't mean he shouldn't see what a real process looks like. So I can videotape. If I have a good apparatus here, I'll videotape the operation of that apparatus. You at least see that in operation. And then you go to the simulator. Notice the other tabs. I'm giving you access to a pre-viva. Okay. There are common questions most students will end up asking. I might as well put up answers there. I give you references for additional learning in case you want to read more about this topic. I tell you about how the equipment itself is put together in case in your college you want to try to put it together, okay, and then ask for your feedback. So, the theory, and at this point nothing fancy, you can in fact make out that this is more or less cut and paste out of a lab manual, a PDF onto this as an online thing. The videos of how it's actually operating, okay, the pre-vivas and so on. The simulator. Now, this again, if you look at it, we are not attempting to come up with fancy graphics. This is not, it does not have to be as realistic as a flight simulator. Because what is the point? I am trying to convey a concept. I am not trying to get you to visualize it as if you would be an operator in a refinery. I just need you to appreciate a simple concept. So, an abstract diagram to convey the concept, and then I start allowing you to choose things, choose set points. Okay, keep going. You try stuff, you try calculations, something's wrong, and I know, because I've done the real calculations in the background, because you've done the real experiments, I know a range of answers, and at this point if you are coming up with something totally incorrect, I prevent you from going forward on to the next thing. Okay. The second thing that we try to do, and a colleague of mine put together a simple device called a single board heater, and the idea here was, if you take a heating element and you power it up, okay, and you have a CPU fan which you can pull off. So, all of these things can be pulled out of a computer basically, which means you will have access to low cost parts. Then actually you are able to teach most of process control as a topic. What is involved here? I have the ability therefore to either heat up or cool down a particular probe, and I can monitor the temperature, and how fast I blow that fan or how much power I supply to that heating element controls finally the temperature, and I can teach pretty much everything about control. That is a simple device. So, we created some of these things and kept it online, and there are sensors there, and these sensors are streaming data to a website. And now you have a very funny real world problem, which is somebody sitting far away doesn't believe that there is a real device here. So, maybe I have a simulator which is feeding him data. How do they know that it is a real device which is giving him data? So, one of the things we have to do is actually have a web camera now available, actually showing the numbers change, readouts change, and we have to stream the web camera data as well, in addition to the raw data going across. So, the sensors are giving data, but the web camera is also giving you a feel for the visuals and the sound. For example, if there is a motor there, it would be nice for you to hear the sound of the motor as you change your RPM. So, how do you get that kind of feeling across to a person? And this is where the challenge level now goes up, because we are saying, can you come up with an experience, but how realistic can you make that experience? Okay, and what technologies do you need to make that experience realistic? So, in this case, it is a simple device, and the intent was to get people to use it in a flipped mode. So, what the colleague then did, well, I will show you the interface how this works. So, a student would register and book a slot on that experiment. You can book a slot at any time of day. Okay. Now, here is another important thing about lab education. Think about when the lab course is done relative to the theory course. Go back to any labs that you have done. When is the lab course done relative to the theory course? After? No, not that way. You are taking some theory, let us say you are doing heat transfer. You have learned the topic of heat transfer as theory. When would you do the heat transfer lab? Much later, much later, much later. You have already forgotten all the theory by then, that much later, right, which is pointless. But if I give you the option of learning the lab or doing the lab experiment anytime you wanted, is it not logical that the moment you have done that lecture in class, you then go to the lab experiment? Because you can log in online and do it. So, we started doing that experiment on campus. In other words, flipping the model, where the lecture is available to you, you are free to book a slot on a device, and we quickly realized this was going to be a very useful idea. So, we made some 20-30 copies of the device, enough for the whole class. They all try to do it only at midnight, enough of devices to handle the load, and we got them to evaluate their concepts by trying out the appropriate theory on the device. The second thing that was done here, and these are just interfaces, so the booking slots and so on, they connect. And the second thing we did here was actually get them to use Scilab, because now actually it's a more complicated thing going on. There's a device, and I'm asking you to control the device, which means you have to learn some software to control the device. So indirectly what happens here is that you're learning a piece of software. So that's what happened with this. Okay, you execute your own codes, you get some data back. This is a particular step test experiment that was conducted, and you get some data, and now you're being quickly forced into trying to interpret what this data is. And at this point, this is not necessarily exactly what you see in textbooks, this data. And that's the next level challenge. Why is it not the same thing as what's said in your textbook? And this is where you learn. Because if it is exactly what's in your textbook, I could have just drawn a graph and shown you a graph, and that's the end of that story. Right? So most of the advances that you have had in engineering and science is because somebody is asking, why is this not able to describe? Why is this model not able to describe the data that I see? That's when you ask, what tweak do I need to the theory? What modification do I need to the theory? So this is the kind of thing that goes on with these kinds of experiments. As I said, a way to visualize this. So if you look at what happened and what's been the history of the whole project, so here's a summary. So we went through a pilot phase 6 years ago, where we simply asked, can you create 10 labs, and would this even work? And it worked. Instead of 10 labs, we created 23. The ministry then jumped into a main phase where it said, let's try to create many more labs. And collectively, remember there were these 12 partners which I showed you. So between the 12 partners, they started creating a basket of 80 labs in all the primary engineering disciplines for the most part. And that's because it was easy to create labs in the engineering disciplines. The lab manuals existed. So just try to interconvert them into simulators one by one. So we went into a phase 1 over a 2-year period, and then immediately we got asked the question, can you now prove that these things are rolling out and people are using content? It's one thing for me to say I've created content. It's like NPTEL, same thing. I create a video. Does it mean that somebody is learning from that video? How do you prove that somebody is learning? And that's a hard challenge. How to prove that somebody is learning? I mean, most of us finally come back to some kind of exam and say, if you get whatever 40% plus, that meant you learned. That's actually a problem. If you think about it, what does 40% pass mean from an exam perspective? What does 40% pass in a lab exam mean? Does it mean that I should allow you to be recruited into that refinery and allow you to handle that real device there? There's a 60% chance you'll blow it up, right? Should I interpret it that way? No? But if you had that ability to take that experiment again and again, could you not correct that 40% and improve your scores and go towards 100%? Yeah? So think of that thought. So we are now in phase 3. We're now in phase 3, where the mandate now is that we increase outreach, and we are flipping this. So we created all the content we wanted to create. And the question comes up, why is IIT creating content for all the universities out there? And the reason I say that is not because we shouldn't be doing these things, but because our syllabus is different from your syllabus. And you are best equipped to tell us what experiments ought to be created for your syllabus, because you are most motivated to use those experiments anyway. So effectively what we are starting is a phase where we are asking colleges, can you create your own experiments, and rather than us create a platform and give it to you, can we get into a mode where we hold workshops to explain to you how to create your own experiments, and then you go create it for yourselves and maintain it for yourselves. And that's the current community-based development phase that I'm now talking about. We built 35 remote triggered gadgets around the country, and then we finally killed off this project. Not because it was not a great idea, but for one simple reason. Okay? If you think about it, one student accesses a hardware device at a time, even if they are taking it through the internet. We realized, or well, not we, the ministry realized, MHRD, there is not enough money to build enough copies of all these devices, even if they are sitting somewhere central, to cater to all the students in the country. Whereas, if I create a simulator, any number of people can take the simulator simultaneously. So it's a simple economics decision, for which purpose MHRD stopped funding RT labs, but it's something we have started working independently on our own. So, in a sense, the current status is that we are completing a move to a single platform. There's been a cleanup, and when I say FOSS here, it's free and open source software. A problem that came up is, if, for example, you used a software like MATLAB to create an experiment, there's a problem. Why? Because I'm now keeping this whole thing online, and then the company which sells MATLAB complains, you pirated a copy of MATLAB, you buy my license now. And because now so many people are using these experiments, thousands of students, not just one license, buy thousands of licenses, which is a lot of money. And you can't hide this because you're keeping a central world visible website. It's not like you're working with a pirated copy in your department. So we said we can't, there's no model here which will allow us to finance the use of proprietary software in lab experimentation. So that kick-started a different kind of effort, which is, are there open source replacements for proprietary software? There are problems with that idea, which is the open source solutions are not as clean in terms of interface, as full of features. There is Scilab compared to MATLAB, okay? But for the other things that you might be interested in, you might not find so many alternatives. So if you look at what we now have as a basket of material, and we have gone beyond engineering, so you're starting to see content in the physical sciences, because others are getting excited by this and want to create content on their own, and they're collaborating. Okay. If you look at where it's gone, you can immediately see that computer science and electronics dominates. Why? Because they were been the guys who have been programming all the time anyway. They already had some of these things, and it's been easy for them to just find a way to keep it all online. Whereas, if you look at some of the other disciplines, including chemical engineering and mechanical engineering and so on, most of our lab experiments actually are relatively what? Expensive gadgets, which now have to be mapped onto simulators. And by the way, in these kinds of disciplines, most of your experiments don't have perfect theory behind them. The theory is reasonably approximate, okay, which is fine when you're learning something, but it might explain why, therefore, when you do an experiment, the data is slightly different from what the textbook says the data should be, which has meant that we don't have the quality of simulators which can simulate even these non-idealities. We don't have such sophisticated simulators yet, and there's a need to generate those kinds of things in these disciplines. We then said there's no way people from IT can go out and explain to everybody how to roll things out, and we said we really need to create a paradigm where there are colleges which actually elevate to become what are called nodal centers. And the idea was, as a first effort, we create content, but we immediately hand it over to the nodal center, and we ask them to roll it out for their own students, but then roll it out for the colleges around them. Learn how to do it on your own, and then start doing it in your circle. Okay. So as I said, IIT Bombay would logically look after this domain, and except for the Northeast, you'll realize that we've got reasonably good coverage with this program. Okay. If you zoom in and look at where our nodal centers are in Maharashtra and Gujarat, again wide coverage, and the good thing is you'll realize that there's adoption in the interior. It's not just happening in Mumbai or Ahmedabad and so on. The colleges elsewhere which are starting to adopt this as nodal centers. If you look at stats of how people are getting trained on this, okay, this has started, we realized, to make an impact to that college. In its own way, there was this branding. For a college to say it is taking content created by others, including the IITs, and is using it in its training, was an addition to a brand for that college. And within a zone itself, you will see it's not necessarily even. You can clearly see there are some better performing zones and some underperforming zones. This is the feedback, and as you can imagine, for a student who has had no exposure to lab education, to be given even a simulator, and I'm not saying we did great stuff, we did not do great stuff. There are enough lab simulators which were created where now we know there were errors in the simulations, there were bugs, or the interface was not great. We know there are all kinds of issues, but people were so desperate for this that if you look at the ratings, only one poor. Okay. So we'll take a break here. This is a good point, because what I want to then talk about is what's the way forward and how do I see people like you contributing in the way forward.